Alright, it's been about, this is day 11 since I turned the bike in. Did a little work in the spare time, got rid of the bug eye turn signals, got the flush mounts. I like the look of that a lot better. I think it helps out the bike. I don't know whose bike that is, we just parked together. Yeah, so it's been 10 days and these mechanics keep jerking me around. I finally took it back from them and decided that I was going to try and do it myself. And by it, I'll explain what I did later. So this is going to be the first real startup after I did, quote, quote, it. And I want to see whether or not it's going to start up easy. So here we go, fingers crossed. Wait for the fuel pump to do its thing. And give it a shot. Alright. Took a little bit of fight, but it did come on. So, basically here's the situation. After I tipped my bike, like I said before, there wasn't any major damage, but it didn't seem to be driving well. Now, I don't know if that's because I just started paying attention to how it was driving after I tipped it, and it was having issues before, or if something actually happened to the bike when I tipped it. So I started trying to diagnose it myself, looked online for other kinds of issues people were having. So you can see here, one of the things I tried to do, I turned my idle up, so my idle's a little bit higher. I replaced my spark plugs, and I put some fuel injector cleaner in the bike. So I've got good spark, I should be getting good fuel. My idle should be high enough. The weather outside is fine. That only leaves a couple things that are potential issues. Alright, now that this is rolling, we'll try to go a little bit. So, if you know how engines work, which I do, there's only a couple other things that really could potentially be an issue with the bike having wobbles at low speed, or not getting sufficient power, not starting up well. That's going to be some kind of an engine problem typically. Maybe electrical if we're not getting enough spark, but like I said, I already tried to address that. So that really only leaves two things. Air getting into the engine intake, air getting out of the engine exhaust. So I had taken it into these mechanics to try and get their opinion on it, see if they could fix it, see what was going on. And obviously they've been taking forever, but they told me a couple things. They said, one, the guy that bought the bike, I'm the guy that bought the bike. The guy that I bought the bike from, he had done a couple things to it, which he told me about. One was he put a Kentin air filter in it, and two was he put this Yoshi slip-on exhaust on it. And they basically said, well, you're getting way too much airflow through the bike now, the bike doesn't know how to handle it, you need a power commander. So that's a good $300, plus they wanted $75 an hour labor. I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure I do need a power commander. I don't know as much about bikes, but I do know they've got a computer in them, and I put a Kentin air filter in 50% of all the cars I've bought. Never had an issue there. On my old Mazda RX-8, I had a Kentin air filter. Well, I eventually went cold air it, but whatever. And I put an exhaust on that, which is a similar situation, and the bike did just fine. Or the car did just fine. The computer was able to compensate, it was able to read, adjust the fuel injectors, yada yada, everything was fine. So I'm not seeing particularly good reason why this bike wouldn't be running just because of those two bolt-on upgrades. In the middle of this, mind you, the guy is calling my bike carbureted, which it's fuel injected. So he obviously did not know much about what was going on, and later admitted to me he didn't. And said, yeah, we have one of our other mechanics working on it. I do Harleys, I don't really do sport bikes. I didn't really trust this guy. He admitted he didn't know what he was doing. I finally talked to the other mechanic, in the meantime he proceeds to tell me that I need a new exhaust. And he doesn't mean a new slip-on exhaust, he means a header exhaust. So he wants to sell me that and a power commander. Otherwise, he says you need to go back to the stock air filter, blah blah. We do that. Then finally I talked to the real mechanic, and he says, yeah, Suzuki has this set valve thing, and says your set valve is stuck, or it's not acting right, so you're not getting enough exhaust out. Finally, we have something that makes some amount of sense to me. So I said, all right, can we disable the set valve? And he says, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Meanwhile, I look online and start finding a bunch of other people disabling their set valves. It's a really, you do have to take the fairing off or whatever, but it's not that involved of a process. It's fairly common. And the guy calls me back like an hour later, the first guy, not the mechanic, the sleazier guy that was calling my bike carbureted, calls me back and is like, hey, we tried to disable your set valve, but one of your wires is bad. We have to order another factory wire. And I didn't know why they couldn't just disable it, but I was like, whatever, maybe it has something to do with this F1 light, which you see on my bike now, that a couple people have mentioned online. So I said, all right, go ahead. Eventually it was just taking them forever to get this part in, and I kept looking online and seeing how simple it was to disable the set valve. So I was like, dude, screw it, I can do this myself, give me my bike back. And of course, I said it much more politely. I was like, oh, I've got, a ride I gotta do this weekend or something, I'll bring it back in when that wire finally gets here. Excuse. So I took the bike back. It took me 2 hours today, but that was with like texting people, goofing around, trying to figure out, how to get the bike undone, the fairings off, and fighting with the cables. I just disconnected the cables running to my set valve. I left the servo motor on there, thinking that wouldn't throw a F1 light or whatever, but it did. And I don't want to jinx it, but the bike seems to be running okay now. So basically what I just wanted to say is, like, it's really obnoxious to me how often mechanics attempt to take advantage of people. I know that's a stigma they have, but they have that stigma because they do it. There's a lot of wind. And like, I know enough stuff that they're not going to really get away with it with me, but they still tried to do it anyways, which is what makes it so frustrating. And then eventually I just take my bike back and take care of it myself. I was talking to my dad the other day about, growing up, becoming a man, living on my own, whatever else, and talking about, what stuff I was ready for, what stuff I wasn't ready for. And I was telling him, one of the things I wasn't ready for was the amount of scummy people in the world. And don't get me wrong, I'm not looking at the world with rose-colored glasses or anything. I expected there to be scummy people, but I expected it to be like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7% of the population. It is not 5 to 7% of the population. It is like 35% of the population. There's an insane amount of people that are so scummy. And he was just like, yeah, it's really kind of disappointing. But I don't get why they couldn't just do an honest day's labor. Why, when I talked them down enough, I was like, all right, if you say the issue is intake and exhaust, why don't we just disable the set valve and put in a stock air filter? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could do that. It's like, dude, when we're talking about spending hundreds of dollars, they quoted me like $800 all in. That was just for the power commander. That wasn't even with buying the brand new exhaust they wanted me to buy. When we're talking that kind of money, I don't know how much money they thought I had, but I don't think the average person is just ready to blow $1,000 on something that, they're assuming I don't understand with no explanation. Why wouldn't you at least tell me that, yeah, you're going to get a lot more power out of your bike with the power commander and brand new exhaust, but if you can't afford it, here's, option B. They don't. They just go right to, oh, you need a brand new exhaust, which you can buy from us and have installed by us and pay us labor. And why don't you get a power commander, which you can also buy from us and have us install for labor. It's just, I don't know. This is just like a week after I dropped my car off at the Volvo dealership, because I've got a, what do you call that? I've got a warranty that came with my car. And they said they didn't have any other like mechanics they would recommend in the area, so I could take it wherever I wanted. I figured the safest place to take it would be to the Volvo dealership, since it is a Volvo. And I do take it to the Volvo dealership, and I tell them up front, because I don't want to have to deal with any payment issues in the end. Said, hey, I'm working through this warranty company, blah, blah, blah. Can you work with them? Whatever. And they're like, yeah, we can work with them. So what do? They come up with $8,000, or sorry, Ace wrong. They come up with $6,000 worth of repairs, and my bike is only worth about $8,000. So I'm calling bullshit, because I'm listening to some of the stuff they're describing. I don't understand this quite as much, because all they did was really give me a parts list. They didn't actually explain what was wrong with the car. But I take it to another dealership, and they're like, oh yeah, basically this is all bullshit. They said when the Volvo dealership found out you were working through a insurance company or whatever, they pretty much just assumed they could lump on whatever was there, and the insurance company would pay for it. Just what a scummy thing to do. It doesn't matter if you're stealing from me or if you're stealing from a company, you're still stealing from somebody. And I understand bigger companies, especially insurance companies who, maybe treat some people poorly as well. Maybe they deserve it and maybe they're faceless, but stealing is stealing. Why can't you just take the business you're offered, be happy with it, and call it a day? Why do you have to try? Yeah, so long story short, Firestone then fixes my car for like $1,000. 1/6 of what Volvo was claiming needed to be done. And at least, knock on wood, right now, it's still running just fine. So, I don't know if there's a lesson in all that, or more just me whining and complaining about how obnoxious it is when people try to steal from you, but it just happens way too much, and it makes me sad. Also, in the meantime, my car sat at the Volvo dealership for another, similar, I think, 10 days or so before I finally started raising hell about it, because they weren't even giving me updates. They wouldn't even tell me what was wrong. So, in the meantime, I didn't have the bike yet. I had been racking up, I think, $475, $485 worth of rental car fees, which the rental car company wouldn't pay for, and I had asked Volvo if they would give me a courtesy car since my car had been there for so long, and they said no. So, yeah, hate.